Good evening, everybody, and welcome into another episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I am really sorry if you're trying to listen into the live stream here tonight, as it was a bitch with a lot of the technical issues. So I do sincerely apologize if you listen to the live stream, but nonetheless, we're here. We're ready to rock. We're ready to roll. And if you're listening on the live stream, don't worry about it. You didn't have to worry about the technical difficulties. You're listening whenever. You're listening if you're out there shoveling probably another foot of snow by the time you're probably listening to this. You know what? Knock on wood, because I don't want to deal with any more snow right now. I know we're in New England, but I'm just ready for spring. I'm ready for baseball weather. I'm ready to go play baseball in my men's league. But man, I'm just done with it. Just like I was done with all those technical issues at the beginning of this podcast. But we're here. We're ready to rock. We're ready to roll. So we'll jump right into it here. And without further ado, it is our out of box segment, which is still brought to you by this guy right here. And of course, we have to start off with the Boston Celtics, who are on a bit of a skid. They are lost three in a row, and they have done it in epically bad fashion, dropping not just double digit, but in the case of the Nets game, a 28-point lead. In the Cavs game, it was a 14-point lead. And I know the game against the Cavs, they were without Jason Tatum, Rob Williams, and a few other starters. But still, when you still had Jaylen Brown out there, you still had a roster that at one point they were up by 13 to 14 points. The Knicks game was just embarrassing, that blowout loss. So it was just an all-around bad week here for the Celtics. So they are underway tonight playing the Portland Trail Blazers. And at the halftime, they do have a double-digit lead again. So we'll see this time if they can close it out going into their next game here Friday night, and as they head out on the road for a 6-game swing that'll take them around the West Coast, and they'll actually go out to Portland to play the Trail Blazers. So it's just been ugly here for the Celtics, and Jason Tatum is not playing his best ball. We'll get into that here in just a moment. But all around, the Celtics just have not looked great. Just when it looked like they were getting healthy and all their starters back together after the All-Star break, then you're dealing again with an injury to Rob Williams. But then again, it's Rob Williams. You have to expect that at some point in the season, he's going to get hurt. Why they don't have better, at least insurance policy for him, I don't know. I know they went out and got Mezolla, but he's more of that swing type of big power forward guy that they ended up getting. But still, you have to weather those injuries. And the Celtics have just played some of their worst basketball that they have. They reverted back to what they were before, when they went 18-21 to start last season, before Udoka turned them around. And obviously we all know the story. They went to the NBA Finals. And it put the Celtics in huge expectations for this year to repeat as Eastern Conference champions and get back and compete for an NBA title. But right now, you can't even think about the playoffs. There's a lot more you got to straighten out before you even get to that point. I mean, they're going to make the playoffs, but I'm talking about as far as getting back to the championship level, there's a lot that you're going to have to fix before you get there. Now, on the other side of the garden, the Boston Bruins are on the opposite end of the spectrum. While the Celtics are into a losing streak, the Boston Bruins are on a hot streak. They are winners of 10 in a row, as they last played Saturday against the New York Rangers, taking a 4-2 victory over Patrick Kane and the Rangers. And they just keep on dominating their opponents. The worst game of that trip, or that 10-game stretch so far, has been that win in Seattle against the Kraken, a 6-5 overtime winner. But I mean, that's the sign of great teams, is that you find ways to win when you got less energy in the tank, when you're running on low, you're dealing with some injuries, or you're in the last leg of a road trip. Those are where you find those good teams. You find the qualities of a champion, and the Bruins are just on fire. They're 49, 8-5, only 8 regulation losses. Just let that sink in. 8 regular season losses, and they're only 2 of those are come at home, by the way, so far in the season. So they are just killing it, absolutely killing it. I mean, there has been a little bit of a downer to some of the news, as though they did lose Taylor Hall, who was placed on the long-term IR, and so wasn't Nick Foligno. And Nick Foligno had a massive turnaround this year after signing that, what was it, 3 or 4 year deal last year as a free agent. Had a down season last year. He is obviously a veteran. He's older, but still, you're looking for a little bit more production this year. He's finally given that to you. And Taylor Hall's been a little bit up and down this year, but still is bringing it. Well, he was starting to bring it lately, before that injury over the last 10 games or so before he got hurt. So that was a ding to your third line, because you have a former Hart Trophy winner on your third line. So that just shows you how deep the Boston lines are. Now, you will have to weather that storm. Now, luckily, Don Sweeney said, damn the torpedoes, and at the trade deadline, because we were off. Well, we already knew of the Orlov trade, because that happened a week before the trade deadline. And then the trade deadline was actually the day of our show last week. So, it was that Thursday after our show. So basically last week, where we left you off, they made the Orlov and Hathaway trade. And then the Bruins made a trade for Tyler Bertuzzi, the very productive left winger, excuse me. And he's a guy in the past who's had 2 20+ goal seasons, and in the 2020 the 20 and 2021 season had a 30+ goal season. So this is a guy that you're not just getting, and he's younger. He's 28, 29 years old. So you're still getting a guy that's young, and that, if you're willing to, and depending on how the cap works out, is going to be, could be there for a while. If you have the money to sign him, could be there for long term. So we'll see how that goes in the off season. So that's kind of that's a side note, because obviously right now you're focusing on this year, and this year only right at this time. But I got to give it to Don Sweeney. After making the hiring of Jim Montgomery and firing Bruce Cassidy, which he was a popular coach as far as with the fans and the media, but it seems as though he didn't have it these last couple of years here with the players. But Montgomery has come in and done a bang up job. But my point there with Sweeney is that we all wanted him out the door, but at this trade deadline, he killed it. He ended up getting a top four defenseman, and then got a winger that could be a top 2 winger. But obviously, because of how stacked the first 2 lines are, you now have Bertuzzi to go on that third line. And if Taylor Hall comes back, then you pair up Hall and Bertuzzi and Coyle on that third line. That is special down at that for a third line. Then you're talking about being as deep as those cup-winning Tampa Bay teams of recently. So the Boston Bruins are loaded for bear. Now, obviously, right now Bertuzzi's going to get a lot. I mean, he was going to get a lot of playing time anyways, but right now, obviously, with the injury to Taylor Hall. And depending on how things go, I've heard from some people that are in the know, but it's not a report. It's just kind of speculation that he could be ready by April, somewhere in the middle of April, kind of be ready for that last couple weeks of the regular season or week of the regular season, get tuned up and get ready for the playoff run. So that would be interesting here to see how that kind of goes for the Boston Bruins. But nonetheless, they are dealing, but they have gotten their pieces. They loaded for bear. They got their winger, they got their defenseman. They won out, and they were in a spot of, oh, we can want this year. We can want. We don't. They were so good and so deep already that this was all pretty much, hey, what would you like? What cherry do you want to put on top of this sundae? And that's exactly what Sweeney did. Now, obviously, the Bertuzzi trade makes it a little bit more of a necessity than just a cherry on top of that sundae. But still, if Hall comes back, then it's again, he goes back to being the cherry on the sundae. Now, obviously, probably the biggest move wasn't a trade, but was the massive extension that Pastrnak got. We've all been waiting for it this whole season. We've kind of been waiting on pins and needles. Obviously, Boston fans are shell-shocked just because of the team that plays crosstown with the Boston Red Sox, with losing guys like Bogarts and Betts over the last 4 years. You didn't want to see another young star walk out town. Now, the tide has turned a little bit because you have Rafael Devers signing his massive extension. And then now you have David Pastrnak, who's only, 26 years old. Now he just signed his 8 years for $90 million. The guy's getting, and in hockey, that is a huge contract because remember, they have a very small cap. What is it? 93, 94, $95 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. So you can't have baseball or basketball or hell, even some of those football contracts like quarterbacks get. Like the biggest contracts in the NHL, like $13 million a year. So pretty much like what a utility guy in baseball is getting is what a hockey guy gets. But nonetheless, it's because of their cap. But so David Pastrnak, as far as in hockey terms, is getting the bag. He and honestly, he's got if you want to put it this way, he got a little bit of a kind of discount, I would say, as far as this is a guy that was probably worth 12 or 13, but obviously he values staying in a city like Boston, a team like Boston that wants to compete for cups and is rabid about hockey. So he made that choice, but obviously he didn't leave money on the table. He's still getting his $11.2 million a year. So he's getting paid a ton of money. So they finally wrapped up Pastrnak and they put him in like the top 5 paid hockey players in the league right now, and he deserves every penny. So finally he gets at that. So that Don Sweeney again strikes again, and he had the best trade deadline between getting Bertuzzi, getting Orlov and Hathaway, and obviously topping it all off with signing David Pastrnak to that long-term extension. So things are looking up here for the Boston Bruins. And then we turn to the Boston Red Sox, who are just as hot as the Bruins, albeit obviously we're in spring training. So take it with a grain of salt, but still it's a lot better than we thought. They're off it to a 8-0-3 start. So they are undefeated into spring training. They're taking on Team Puerto Rico in a scrimmage. So this one doesn't count towards that standings, but again, spring training. So record really tongue in cheek as much as we talk about how red hot the Red Sox are. It's still spring training. So we're talking more about getting tuned up for the season. But again, there are some good storylines to kind of talk about from this standpoint as well. So without further ado, we will dive right into our main topic here as the Boston Celtics, as we just mentioned off the top of the show, are on a 3-game skid to start the year, to start basically this week. It was not pretty at all. They had that game against the Brooklyn Nets, which started this whole spiral. Now remember, the Brooklyn Nets no longer employ the services of a Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, the only one and James Harden. Obviously, James Harden got moved last year, but that big three is gone. Ben Simmons is the only name player. Well, I know Mikal Bridges is a name player. Don't get me wrong. He was a good player out there for the Phoenix Suns before he got moved in the deal for excuse me, for Kevin Durant. But still, at the same time, the Boston Bruins should have just run away with that game. They were up 28 points on that last Friday night. So we're almost a week ago where this happened. So last Friday night they had a 28-point lead over the Brooklyn Nets, again, who have traded away most of their stars, and they're obviously on a rebuild. And it looked like the Celtics were going to cruise to an easy victory over Brooklyn. And before you know it, you look down, it's a 19-point game. Okay, all right. 19 points, still a pretty sizable lead. Okay, it's chipped down to 14. You're like, okay, let's kind of kick it back in. But all right, we still have a solid cushion. And then they're chipping it down to single digits. You're like, what is happening? And then before you know it, Brooklyn just ran away with that game, and they ended up winning them 115 to 105. So you have, from being down 28 points, having a 10-point victory, that was something. And then you had just you had an off performance by Jason Tatum in that game. He didn't look great. And then you have the Knicks game where that was even a worse disaster as far as Tatum was concerned. He had a horrible shooting night. And at one point in that game, you had a 14-point lead, and you ended up losing 131 to 129 in overtime. Just ridiculous. Just absolutely ridiculous. And it looked like you had a couple chances there to win it in OT, but you just couldn't close it out. And then again, I know we use it a lot this show, but the cherry on top of it is awful Sunday full of crap. Just got topped off with a overtime loss in Cleveland. And that was so ugly there at the end, where the Celtics, like I talked about, I know they were undermanned. I know you didn't have Tatum. I know you didn't have Williams. I know you didn't have Brogdon in that game. So you're missing some key guys. But still, you were up double digits again. You had a double-digit lead at half, and you pissed it away again. You can only deal with what you have out on the court, and you still had Jaylen Brown. You still had Derek White. You still had Al Horford. You still had a chunk of your guys that you rely on out there, and they were getting the job done for a majority of that game. And then or at least in that first half, and then again, I know Cleveland is a good team. Cleveland they've made some moves to get some pieces in there. Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. I like that duo. But man, it was just so upsetting, just because you had you had a lead. You showed that, okay, we don't have all of our stars here tonight, but guess what? We're putting together a hell of an effort, and we're winning against a pretty good Cleveland team without the help of some of our major stars. And what do? You just crap another one away. And then again, at the end of the game, right at the end of regulation, it's tied, and Grant Williams has a chance he just has to knock down not two, just one free throw. One damn free throw. And he can't sink one free throw. He can't get one free throw. And of course, what makes it worse is the video's out there, and it's easy. You don't have to be a lip reader to really to know what he's saying. He's just, I'll hit them both. I'll hit them both. I'll hit them both. He repeats it 3 times. Well, Grant Williams missed them both. And yes, I know you had a chance to win it in overtime, but you had a chance to seal it right there. You had a chance to end the losing streak. You just have to hit one, because you know what was left on the clock? Not even a full second. 0.8 seconds. 0.8. Not a full second. 0.8. I know technically that's still enough for a catch and shoot if you in most cases, but still you're under a second, where it may not be a guaranteed win, but at least you're forcing them to take a tough catch and shoot chance. You can't even get one goddamn free throw. Not one free throw. And you want to say, I'll hit them both. I'll hit them both. Well, guess what? You let Donovan Mitchell right into your head. You let him waltz right in. He didn't even buy rent. He's like, I'm buying this property. I'm buying it. Screw renting it. I'm buying property here in your head, Grant. And Grant Williams just choked under in that opportunity. Nah, it's so disappointing. It's just so frustrating. And as much as I want to blame this on coaching with Joe Mezolla, which I'll get to him here in a second, still, if you're Tatum, if you're Brown, I mean, Brown really is the only one that can be exempt from this, because in all these losses that they've had, Brown has actually put up big shots and come up pretty big in these moments. It's just been the rest of his team around him that's let him down. And obviously, we all know this is Jason Tatum's team. I know we've kind of gotten to a little bit of the silly hour here, if you will, when it comes to Jason Tatum, because then some people, just because of the little bit of the slump that he's going through right now, like, oh man, well, yep, time to trade Jason, time to get rid of Jason, because when they're just getting frustrated with it, I'm not gonna say that. He's a superstar, and it's hard to find those superstars. Yes, was it frustrating to see the way that he's played? Yes. And that's where I will bang on him here a little bit, is just, I know last week I mentioned it didn't seem like he'd been the same since banging up his wrist, but he did put together that 40-point game in that overtime loss to the Knicks. So he did put up decent stats in that particular game. But again, it was just a horrible shooting night because it was all on volume. So Tatum is just that's kind of the one where, especially in the Brooklyn game, he didn't play his best in the Brooklyn game. Like you said, it was a lot of high volume, low efficiency in the game against the Knicks. So it was a lot of frustration there, as far as you could see just how Jason Tatum was just you could see it where it was kind of like he was getting frustrated and kind of going a little faster, or not going faster, but kind of maybe being a little more methodical and kind of thinking things through, excuse me. So it's just again, it's just been frustrating with just how things have gone. And as much, like I said, as much as I would like to put like a ton of this blame on Mezolla, again, guys just like Marcus Smart, who has been a driver of this team the last couple of years, it just seems like he's reverted a little bit into the old Marcus Smart, just a little bit. You need to see him get back to being that major distributor, and maybe not take as many shots and distribute that ball. And dare I say, should we even think about maybe Derek White or Malcolm Brogdon maybe switching around? Now, obviously, I know Brogdon becomes that special weapon off the bench, so I don't know if I really want to touch that. He comes in there and gives you that secondary scoring when a Jason Tatum or a Brown is off the court. But still, maybe that's where you put Derek White. I know he's kind of cooled off a little bit after getting off to that, or where he had that red hot stretch, not even red hot, white hot stretch, but still, It's just been frustrating just watching these Celtics. And the other part of this is, which this does come back onto Joe Mazzulla, has been some of those lineup decisions where I don't know what goes through some of those decision making. And again, the timeouts that he doesn't take, where a team goes on this big run and it's like, okay, I know you want to let the players play. I get it. But at the same time, you gotta be willing to, when you see some of those massive runs or you see some of those mistakes happening, you see you see them pile up like 3 or 4 turnovers in a row on a possession. They got to take those time out, let them kind of cool off, let them decompress there for a second. And I think it might be fair enough to ask that question: is it too big of a moment for Joe Mazzulla? Is he ready for prime time to handle all these superstars, to handle these stars, to handle a superstar in Jason Tatum? Now, I'm not, obviously these coaches, he even said today that obviously he's going to have his mistakes, that um obviously he's going to get judged for it because he's a rookie coach, which obviously there's some truth in that reality. But at the same time, you're taking over for a team that went to the NBA Finals last year, got it to a game 6, and obviously he was on the bench for it, so he was there for it too. But you're taking over for a team that went to the NBA Finals, has aspirations of championship or bust. And we've just seen moments where it's like, what are you doing? Why aren't you taking that time out? Or why did you make that lineup decision to put to put this lineup in to match up with these guys, or some of the rotations late in the game? So there are just these moments where you're just questioning, is he ready? Now, he's obviously a very smart basketball coach. You don't get to this point and not be a smart basketball coach. But still, again, it's more about managing in those moments. And there have been times this year where it's like, what are we doing? And especially over this 3-game skid. Now, it's not the end of the world, obviously, with this skid, but it does raise questions with the Boston Celtics. What's going to happen come playoff time? Because you lost to a Knicks and Nets team that just were. The Knicks are kind of in the mix for one of those playing games. They have enough good talent, not great talent, to be to make it to the playoffs. But again, the Nets not good. The obviously the Cavs game. The Cavs are a legitimate playoff team, but it's just what are we doing? What's happening in these situations? And you do kind of have to ask that question, as far as, are the Celtics just turning that switch on and off willingly, being like, all right, we're X amount of games, we're 19 games away, 20 games away from the playoffs. We're into March. All right, let's just kind of try to cruise in and just coast in to the playoffs, and then we'll turn it on. Where you can't do that. This Celtics team has to be running and gunning and play with all that energy. That's what makes them such a good team. And I don't want to see them take their foot off the pedal right now at this moment and just try to coast it in the playoffs. When you coast, then that's where you kind of get into trouble, or where you try to flip the switch on and off. I think that's where you get into trouble. And that's what it just seems like at times. Now, I think when you have a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, who's a veteran, who played, I believe he was on that championship winning Bucks team a couple of years ago before he went to the Pacers. This is a guy that's been there, won a championship, and this is a guy that you waiting for that kind of voice to step up, and he did. He did say that you got to come out and you got to have this good game here tonight before you head off onto a 6-game road trip. before you come home, before, because basically by the end of the road trip, it's going to be the end of March, because that's 6 games on the road. And he's right. He's the one kind of guy that's kind of one of those veteran guys that stepped up and like, no, this is not acceptable. And that was the thing that was kind of also missing with Mezolla and with some of the stars of this team. Like Mezolla, it's up there. It's like, oh no, it's just cool as a, and don't get me wrong, I want him to be cool as a cucumber when the moment's in the brightest lights, and you just want to be like, okay, we're going to go out there and we're going to do our job. But still, when you've had multiple double-digit leads blown, it's one thing to lose, but when you have all these multiple double-digit leads get blown, then it's just it just is ridiculous. It's like, all right, maybe let's see a little bit of fire. Let's see kind of a little bit of that. All right, no, all right, this has to stop. We can't just keep losing in this fashion. And you just didn't feel that urgency until I heard Brogdon speak today. And finally, when he made those comments, I mean, and it looks like tonight, obviously I can't give it a play-by-play, but it looks like tonight maybe that finally got through to their heads. Finally. So we'll see how that kind of goes here for the Celtics. But again, it's just kind of worrisome that this is how it's going for them. So I'll again, I don't. They're going to obviously make the playoffs. They're going to be a serious contender for the title. But if they don't get their heads out of their asses right now and start playing back up to the level where they were at the beginning of the season, where they were playing with a lot of pace, a lot of energy, where they were just absolutely running and gunning. And when they got Robert Williams back, they were still doing that. But then you added in the level of the defense, and it took it to another level. But then obviously lately here, things have just kind of spiraled the wrong direction. But again, I'm not going to say, no, all of a sudden they're not going to be able to compete for a title. They're not going to be able to do this. Yes, they're still right there with Milwaukee. But if you don't clean up your lack of intensity, if you will, your lack of awareness in these situations, then you're going to be going home early, pissing a lot of people off, because everybody had this team as the team to beat or right there with the Bucks. Now, I mean, honestly, I still think this Celtics team is going to be right there in the end there with Milwaukee. I'm not going to, I don't think this is going to be a one. I don't think all of a sudden the Celtics just lost their mojo and they're all of a sudden now they're just going to be a one and done in the playoffs. No, I think you obviously have probably the most loaded roster in the East, and if not the whole NBA. It's just a matter of getting everybody back onto the same page, because it just seems like everybody's kind of gone in not different directions, but it just seems like it's not as cohesive as it was to start the year. Kind of need to get back to that whole situation. So I think they can do it. I think they'll be able to get back to that, just because I think they're so talented, and I think they, as much crap as Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown get at sometimes for being young, for being not being the best leaders. I mean, they're still young. Well, I shouldn't say Brown, but they're still young and they're still evolving. And Jason Tatum just turned 25, but I mean, basketball wise, he's maturing way beyond his years. So I do like. I still think, despite how it's gone lately, I still think the Celtics are going to be able to kind of wiggle their way out of it, kind of get back into. I think you'll get towards the end of the season, you'll kind of get a little bit of your groove back. You'll kind of get that momentum going back towards the playoffs, and I think maybe those comments here by Brogdon, maybe you realize, all right, we can't just kind of flip the switch on and off all the time. Let's keep it on, and let's like you say with the radio, turn it to 11 and break the knob off. That's kind of what the Celtics have to do. Just turn it to 11 and break that knob off, instead of, hey, all right, tonight we'll go 80% instead of 100. No, you're going 100 and 110 every night and breaking that knob off. So we'll see how that go. We'll see how everything goes here for the Celtics. As we mentioned, they're getting into the home stretch of this season. They have that 6-game road trip coming up, and it'll be a big one here to see if they can kind of get back onto track and maybe get on a run, kind of like Milwaukee. Maybe not 15 games, but you get like an 8-10 game winning streak, and then you're feeling a lot better, and you kind of forget about what's happening. If you can just win and string them together, then people will be like, all right, we don't have to hit the panic button. But like I said, there is a little bit of doubt. There is some worry with this team right now because there's things that we're seeing that haven't happened all season long, and then it's creeping into this. So there is worry to this. But again, if with just how talented they are, if they can just be more cohesive and just, like I said, keep the switch on and not turn it off, then I'll feel a lot better. I'll feel back to where I was before. But right now, there is a little bit of concern here with the Celtics. Now to a team that doesn't have a lot of concern, that's going to be the Boston Bruins. And as we mentioned, the Boston Bruins shored up a lot of, well, not shored up because they were already a wagon, but they added depth to an already deep team. We know about Orlov. We talked about him last week. And Hathaway. And then they added, after we left you last Thursday, they traded for Tyler Bertuzzi. Now, Bertuzzi is a guy that is kind of in the mold of Brad Marchand as far as being that nuisance or that pest. And I say that lovingly about Marchand because I love Brad Marchand. I'm glad he's on the Bruins side. If obviously, probably he was playing for Montreal or playing for Toronto or the Rangers or whoever playing for the Lightning, I'd be like, nope, this guy pisses me off probably. But I love him to death. And Tyler Bertuzzi is kind of like the dollar store version of Brad Marchand. Okay, maybe he's better than a dollar store version. He's the Walmart version. So he's not the same. He's not the same exact carbon copy, but he's pretty damn close. And you'll enjoy it. And again, he's a guy that can be an agitator, but he also has skill. This is a guy that, as you mentioned, has 220 goals plus 220 plus goal seasons. And the year before last had a 30 plus goal season. So this is a guy that can score and does bring a lot to the table. Now, I'm not saying he's an absolute sniper like Pasternak is, but this is a guy that's a playmaker, can score goals, and is a legitimate, and would be on a lot of other teams out there, would be a legitimate second line winger. But obviously, with how loaded they are on those first couple lines, they can afford to. It's a luxury item. And like I mentioned earlier, it's turned into a little bit more of a necessity with Taylor Hall out. And obviously that might have been in Don Sweeney's decision making. The problem that we didn't really know how severe that was going to be. And then obviously right after that trade was made, they did place Taylor Hall on the long-term injury reserve. So of course, that's probably the number one reason why he ended up trading for Bertuzzi, was to bring in some insurance, which I mean, I can't blame him for bringing in insurance, especially when you're trying to make a deep playoff run and it's cup or bust at this point. Let's be honest. It's cup or bust with the streak that we'll get to here in a moment, that their historical streak that they're off to. And then the most importantly is you're showing guys like Bergeron and Krejci, who this could be their last year in the NHL. We don't know that yet, but it could be. And with how historic this run has been, you want to give them every shot you can to win a cup. So they were already loaded already. They were already great. They're already historic, but now you just added pieces in Orlov who, I mean, he's not going to score like this the rest of the year, but it's nice to get that offensive production from a guy that was going to be a very good defenseman who does have the capability to score, but maybe not as much as they already has. But you got a good top four defenseman in Orlov. So now you have McAvoy, Lindholm, Orlov, Carlo, and then of course, and then you have Clifton and Grizzlick. So that's a really good core. Now it's going to be probably on most nights going to be between Grizzlick and Clifton that are going to be riding the pine there, if you will, depending on probably matchups. And then, of course, with Bertuzzi, as we mentioned, with the injury to Hall, he's more now a necessity at this standpoint. But it's great that you can get a guy that is a 20 to 30 goal scorer that can just step right in and I love and when Hall gets back, I'm going to love this even more because then you can put Hall maybe at right wing, keep Bertuzzi at left, and then you have Coyle at center. So that third line is going to be really good, really good. They're going to be able to put up points. And like I mentioned, Bertuzzi is a guy that loves to get into those scrums. So he'll be checking guys and be getting physical after the puck. So, and like I mentioned, he's kind of like Marchand was, or it still is. So you're going to have, and obviously Marchand is way more of a skilled player. And that's saying something with Bertuzzi, who's a 20 to 30 goal scorer. But again, it just shows that Sweeney is willing to do anything to get that cup. And again, we criticize Sweeney over the last couple of years for not getting some critical pieces and for drafting poorly. As far as obviously, we all remember that 2015 draft where, yes, Jacob DeBrusk he's now started to produce. So you hit one out of your three. But again, they had those 3 first-round picks. You had guys like Matt Barzal, who's a really good winger there for the Islanders that you could have had, who went right around in that area of picks that the Bruins had. And just kind of not adding some pieces over. Well, I mean, maybe I'll take that back, but it's really kind of been not bringing in some of the young talent to go along and not having that deep farm system to kind of keep things rolling along. But again, where you do have to kind of sit back and give him credit is he has signed all his young guys. David Pastrnak signed the huge extension now, the 8 years for 90. McAvoy is signed long term. Lindholm has the 8-year deal that he signed. And then you have Swayman behind net. You have Allmark signed up for a couple more years. Obviously, you have guys like Coyle. You have Hall still signed. You have a really good young core. You have a lot of your defense locked up outside of like Orlov, who you just traded for, are signed up, and you have your big time scorers in Pastrnak and still Marchand is still there. Obviously, he's getting older, but you still have a lot of your young pieces or your younger veterans that are locked up, and to complement the guys like Bergeron and Marchand and Krejci. So Sweeney, I got to give him credit. And then he may not be able to draft well, but man, he does know how to make trades at the trade deadline. I mean, you go back to Rick Nash, or you go back to actually that might have been a Chiarelli pick, but I mean, he does know when to go get who to go get at the trade deadline because he got Hampus Lindholm, who was a solid player with Anaheim. Remember, he was a top 15 pick for Anaheim. I believe he was like number 8 overall. And he was a little underperforming, but we all kind of knew the talent that Hampus Lindholm had, that he could be a dominant defenseman as well as being a pretty good offensive defenseman as well. And he started to live up to that billing, and the Bruins are just locked him up long term. But again, Sweeney knows how to trade at the trade deadline. Obviously, this year getting Orlov and Bertuzzi and Hathaway. So he's gone out and made those necessary trades. That we can say of him. And right now, the Boston Bruins are on a 10-game win streak. They're finding every which way to win. That game in Seattle should have been a loss. Game in Calgary should have been a scheduled loss. But they were able to pull all those games out. And over this streak, you had a goalie goal with Linus Ullmark in the Vancouver win. So just take that for what it's worth. And now they just can't lose right now. They're just playing amazing hockey right now. They're getting contributions from everybody. And the part that I love is that over this stretch, even that 2019 team that came so close, they went to a Game 7 in the Garden of the Stanley Cup final and lost to the Blues. They were like a one-line team. They had minimal secondary scoring. But this team has multiple goal scorers. They are loaded. This is not just the perfection line anymore. You have the first line, which is Pastrnak. Is Bergeron, Marchand, and DeBrusk. I mean, obviously, Bergeron's a Hall of Famer. He's going to be a guy that gets you in the neighborhood of 25 to 35 goals a year. You have Brad Marchand, who's a 30-plus goal scorer. You have, obviously, DeBrusk, who is coming on strong again this year. I believe he's at 19 goals already, or not already, but he's got 19 goals. He's been dealing with some injuries, so his numbers would be even better. And of course, you have the Czech line, the second line, which is anchored by David Krejci at center. You have Pavel Zacha, who we didn't even talk about earlier. Pavel Zacha was a first-round pick by the Devils, and they traded him away, and he's by far having his best season already. And he signed that 4-year extension. And then, of course, you have the superstar in David Pastrnak, who is, if it wasn't for Connor McDavid or for McJesus, then he would be the Hart Trophy runner-up. So he's on pace to have 60-plus goals. He's absolutely killing it. So, and those are the first two lines. And then when Hall is healthy, you have Hall on your third. You have Coyle, who's a solid center, which, remember, this was a guy that we were like worried that he might have to, if Krejci didn't come back, that he might have to be the second line center, which I love Charlie Coyle when he's your third line center. But when he has to be in your top 6 pairing, that's where I get a little bit worried from that standpoint. But now that he's your third line center, that's perfect for Coyle. And now you have, and that was where Foligno was playing. But now you have Bertuzzi, who could easily be a top 6 forward. But with just how deep they are, he's going to be, he's your left winger right now. And then Hathaway's kind of slid up. But of course, once Hall gets back, then you're going to have a third line of Hall, Bertuzzi, and Coyle. Just let that sink in. You have 3 legitimate lines now. When the last time they were in the Cup, you had like 1.5 lines of actual good offense. Now they have three. Three of their 4 lines are just could could be anybody's top two, could be in anybody's top 2. So just let that sink in, will you, folks? So I just love that direction that they're in. And then, of course, the fourth line, they're just doing yeoman's work as well, because you have those guys down there that are just putting in the work, and they're contributing as well. And then defensively, they're, like we mentioned, those top 4 are just great. So this Boston Bruins team is just absolutely loaded. So we're counting down the days to the playoffs here for the Stanley Cup playoffs, and so get ready to watch what this Bruins team can do, because right now it's all about it's all about cup or bust. And obviously the biggest question heading into that is a guy that we haven't talked about a lot tonight, and that's going to be Linus Ullmark. Linus Ullmark is the runaway favorite. He's all but cemented to be the Vezina Trophy winner. But he's only played in a couple playoff games, and that was last year in his first year in Boston. Now, will this regular season carry over into the playoffs? I don't see why it can't, just from the standpoint that I see the confidence is shifted from what it was. Not that it was bad last year, but this year you just see how much more confident he is now playing in his second year with Boston, with the Bruins. And if this was, he's only started 20 games or whatever, then you could be like, all right, this is just a mini stretch here. But this is a whole, or I should say like 10 or 15 games or 20. If it's a small, it's no longer a small sample size. And I know the playoffs are a different animal. I completely get that. I'm not going to dismiss that. But at the same time, this is not something you can just be like, okay, you just brush aside like, oh no, when you get to the playoffs, it's going to go away. No, I think the confidence that he's grown during the regular season and just the run he's been on, I think it's going to help him tremendously when we get to the playoffs. Because I can't say transfer over just because the playoffs are going to be a whole different thing. But I think this is going to help him out come playoff time, and just the defense that he has in front of him, the team he has in front of him. Now saying the defense he has in front of him, I don't mean that to take away anything that he's done, because he has legitimately stolen some wins here for the Bruins. He stole that win in Calgary for them, where he had the 56 saves. You can't just be a ho-hum average goaltender to have those type of saves on that type of volume. And so he's having a special season, and it's just going to be the matter of, will he show up in the playoffs? Will he be ready? Because if he's playing at this level for Ullmark, and then having Swayman behind him the way he's playing, with the goaltending the way it is, then I feel great about this team. I do. I mean, I already feel great about them already, but that's obviously something that we can't get answered until the middle of April when the playoffs start. So again, we still have 20 games left. So still a little bit here to go. But again, I'm feeling great about this Bruins team. They just have everything clicking for them. Everything is going. It's all running full speed ahead. And to another team where everything's running full speed ahead, that is the Boston Red Sox. Now, I know it's spring training, so you take it with a grain of salt, but things have been going great down there. Things have been looking good here for their starting pitching, as far as Corey Kluber has looked solid. I mean, I'm not expecting Corey Kluber to be the Cy Young winner he was back in 2014 through 2016 in that stretch. But he's looked solid, where you can count on him to be like a third, fourth type of starter, kind of eat those innings and be that veteran type of starter. Chris Sale, yes, you heard that right. Chris Sale finally made an appearance, and he is looking like he's going to be on track to start the season. He's through 2 scoreless innings with 2 strikeouts in his appearance on Monday. Then you have obviously we haven't seen Brian Bayo out there on the mound just yet, but when Bayo gets back and ready, then that's going to be even a bigger boost. But he started to throw again, so I know he got sidelined there with the arm tightness, but everything has been back on track here for Bayo as he's already started throwing again. Now the other surprises have been Brian Mata, who a couple years ago had Tommy John coming back, and he's starting to turn heads. So Mata's turning heads, and then you have Brandon Walter, who's also turning heads here at camp. So you have 2 guys that are vying for positions of maybe being that Garrett Whitlock type. And because with Garrett Whitlock heading to the starting rotation, maybe you get maybe you get a guy like a Brian Mata who comes up, and Mata can be the guy that takes that role, that dominant type of swing role that can pitch anywhere in like the 6th to like 8th inning, depending on how things have gone. So Mata's looked well. Brandon Walters looked good. He started tonight and pitched into 3 innings. The first 2 were quick and easy. Kind of getting a little bit of trouble, but again, it was the Puerto Rico lineup, and they were loaded. I mean, that they have major league caliber guys, not just caliber, I should say major league stars up and down that lineup. Francisco Lindor, Javi Baez, Kike Hernandez, Christian Vasquez. So you have a pretty good lineup there for Puerto Rico. So, but with Brian Mata is just absolutely impressing me so far. That's the one where with Mata, is he going to make an impact here for the Red Sox? That's the part where I'm looking at it right now and be like, he's reached triple digits in spring training, and right now, let's see, because Brian Mata turned, he returned from his lengthy Tommy John last year. He did post a 185 earned run in 10 games last year, but now here in spring training, he's already touching triple digits. He's already having a good camp. He's already starting to turn heads. This is a guy that I liked him before. There was some intrigue before Mata got hurt, but then of course we kind of forgot about him, and Brian Bayo became that next thing. And obviously, I think Brian Bayo is going to be a good pitcher for this team. What I saw last year, gave me hope after his second call up. But again, Brian Mata is turning heads. Tristan Cassius is out there. He's not only playing well, but he's making good contact and having good at bats against left-handed pitching, because obviously that's something you want to see with a guy that obviously we know he can mash righties. And what can you show against major league lefties? And he's putting up really good at bats, and he's had a couple bombs here in spring training already. So he looks like and his command of the strike zone is unparalleled for somebody his age. He just has, he knows what's a strike and what isn't. And sometimes I swear there are some strikes that get called on him that are definitely balls, and he knows the strike zone better than the umpire, where he kind of gives the look of like, all right, that I'll give it to you, you're the umpire, but man, that one was not a strike. He just knows he's got a mature appearance up at the plate as far as knowing how to be selective. And then when he gets his pitch, he can absolutely turn on it. And he's got home run power, gap power. He's going to be, I think he's going to develop into a nice middle of the order, somewhere in between he's going to be in like that 4 to 5 slot later on in the year. I think probably because maybe early in the year he'll get that 6 or 7 spot. Well, he proves himself in the lineup. And then once he can kind of show it, then we'll think maybe we'll see him in that 5 spot, maybe the cleanup spot, depending on how things go. But this is a guy that obviously we were waiting for him for a while, and I know everybody wants to point out last year, oh, you only hit 197. Well, what, he played 20 to 30 something games last year, a very, very, very small sample size. But we saw the discipline that we're seeing here again in spring training. We saw the power hit 5 home runs. This is a guy that I think is going to have 25 to 30 home runs this coming year. And I know we'll kind of get into the expectations in a couple of weeks here, because opening day is the 30th. But again, this is a guy that's you're seeing continuation of that good play, and you're just loving it. And then there are some other surprises in camp. You have Raimel Tapia, who was formerly with the Blue Jays, vying for like that 4th outfield spot. So he is playing pretty well this year. He's made really good hard contact, and obviously he's a pretty solid defender. So he would be a guy to keep your eye on, maybe getting that 4th outfield spot, because again, he's one of those guys that has options as far as maybe getting sent down to AAA. Excuse me. So we'll see how that goes for him, because again, there's still some room as far as on that bench to make some decisions. And another guy that has quietly kind of gone under the radar this spring has been Jarren Duran. Now, Jarren Duran is a guy that we all have kind of, I don't know if we say given up on, but this was a guy that we've all kind of tried to push off to the side, because the last year was a disaster for Duran defensively. He is a guy that, yeah, he can hit some home runs. He had that stretch where he hit those 25 home runs in AAA, but it's a guy that would continue to strike out. And there were some issues where you're like, he would make some comments. Not they weren't bad or anything. It wasn't like, oh man, this really shows some real bad immaturity as far as like you're a bad actual human being. But it was just kind of like decisions that were like made you scratch your head and like, what are you doing? Especially after criticizing reporters. Oh, you try to go out there, catch a fly ball. It's hard, all that, going after the reporters when it's like, just catch the damn fly ball. So there are some there are maybe some baseball maturity issues there with Duran that you don't love as much. But this spring training, he's actually kind of, he's impressed me a little bit here. He's actually impressed me here a little bit. Okay, sorry, just go to text there for you, for me. So all right, so that is going to do it here for your New England Sports Weekly for this episode. As again, I'm sorry about the late start here. Kind of had a little bit of technical issues, but we got it rolling, we got it underway. So we brought you the episode here finally. And remember, you can always like and subscribe to the show. You can always catch us Wednesday night at 8:00, as long as technical issues don't stop us from being a half an hour late. But you can catch the live stream at 8:00 every Wednesday. And you hit the like and subscribe on YouTube, or for the podcast version, you can go to search it on SoundCloud or Spotify, search for New England Sports Weekly, hit the like and subscribe there as well to follow the podcast and get your automatic downloads whenever it's ready, or get the notifications that the pod is ready. And of course, you can send us any questions to my personal Instagram and Snapchat handle, which is the same, at Sean_Met28, or you can hit the show up on Twitter at NE Sports Weekly or the Instagram at SWK, and send us any questions there as well. All right. So just tune in for next week as we'll keep you up to date with everything going on with the Boston Bruins, the Boston Celtics, with spring training with the Red Sox. And of course, with the new league year coming up here, I believe the end of this week, and we'll get it. Free agency is knocking on the door here for the NFL. So we'll see if the Patriots make any moves at the beginning of free agency, or if they'll revert back to their old school way of signing some of the second wave of free agents. So we will keep you up to date on everything. But until next week, have a good one, folks.